Hey, everybody, and welcome to season 2 of the All About Everest podcast. And I'm your host, Pauline Reynolds Nuttall. On this podcast, you can get anything and everything about Mount Everest, including interviews, book recommendations, tips, updates, and a whole lot more. So welcome to the spring 2023 Everest climbing season. And here we go. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the All About Everest podcast. And today's episode is with a very special individual, Guy Cotter from Adventure Consultants. He is a mountaineer, adventurer, and the CEO of Adventure Consultants. If you know anything about Everest history, you know about the 1996 Everest disaster in which Rob Hall passed away. At the time, Rob Hall was the owner of Adventure Consultants, and Guy Cotter took over the company after Rob's death. During the 1996 disaster, Guy was actually guiding on Pomori, and so he wasn't involved. He was actually played by Sam Worthington, the guy from Avatar, in the 2015 Everest movie. Guy and I had a fabulous conversation. I really loved our interview. And I say this every week, how much I love doing these interviews, but I truly mean it. I love people. I don't know if you can tell from listening to me every week, but I am an extrovert, and my 5-minute shopping trip usually turns into 45 minutes because I'll start talking to someone. In fact, I have like grocery store friends. I don't even know their names, but we sit and we visit every time we bump into each other when I go to Albertsons. You guys, this interview was fantastic. We talk a little bit about the 1996 Everest disaster and Rob Hall closer to the end. We mainly talk about the changes in mountaineering, Guy's journey from being a mountaineer to being the owner and CEO of one of the best, if not the best, expedition companies. And he's so down to earth. He's fun to talk to, and his insights to how climbing has changed, how expeditions have changed, how to make things better. It's extremely insightful, and I really enjoyed our conversation. The one thing that I wish that we had talked about was how he is a consultant for movies, and he was a consultant amongst other movies for the 2015 Everest movies. And I totally spaced talking to him about that. I found it very interesting. But before we get to the rest of the episode, just a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about isn't necessarily Everest related. However, it is something that has occurred on Mount Everest and in the Himalayas and other mountaineering expeditions. So on K2, 27-year-old Sherpa Mohammed Hassan died. He slipped from the fixed ropes and was hanging upside down for more than an hour. Well, Kristen Harilla, and I know that I'm saying her name wrong, so I apologize, Kristen, if you're listening to this, has been singled out. And specifically, Kristen has been singled out, even though she was on a team of other individuals, and her team was not the only one on the mountain. Hassan, he fell at probably the most dangerous spot on K2. It's a sheer face, and there's just a tiny bit of a ledge. I want to say it's not even a foot. and it's the most dangerous part of that mountain. So many deaths on the bottleneck, and she has been singled out. The thing is that we were not there. I was not there. And we've talked about this before. There are so many factors when it comes to these decisions on the mountain. I would hope that someone's summit goal and the money that they've paid for this expedition would not even be factors, wouldn't even be relevant. I would hope that it would be more regarding personal safety and capability than anything else. Um, I think a lot of it has to do with whoever hired him. I think that's part of it as well. You know, did they make sure that he had the right equipment and gear? Um, did he have enough experience? Those are factors that come into play as well, but I don't think anyone should be blamed. And the best example that I can give you is the 2006 Everest disaster with David Sharp, when essentially Sir Edmund Hillary, he called out Mark Inglis, who is an amputee, but nobody else was called out for it that publicly. There were other teams on the mountain, and he was climbing with a team, but he specifically was called out. So I want people to just kind of step back a little bit and remember that there are so many factors. This was a similar situation to when Jer McDonald died on K2. He was saving someone, I believe it was two Taiwanese, that were tangled in the fixed ropes. They were upside down, and while he was trying to save them, all three of them perished because of an avalanche. So again, you know, there's so many things to consider. I would like to say that if that happened, um, I would give up everything to help that person. But again, I'm not in that situation. I don't know. We even talked about it at the dinner table this last week because it's such a hot topic. And we were kind of divided. We really were. And the one thing that my brother-in-law said that stuck to me was he should have had a team that didn't leave him behind. And that's something that Guy Cotter touches on in his interview, not this specific situation, but leaving your teammates behind. And that happened a lot this year on Mount Everest. So just kind of something to think about. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is there are a lot of books coming out in the next couple of months that have to do with Everest, but just mountaineering and mountaineers. Guy and I talk about his book that's coming out in October. It's only going to be available in New Zealand, even though he is looking for a publisher elsewhere, like in the US. So hopefully he can find one. It's called Everest Mountain Guide: The Remarkable Story of a Kiwi Mountaineer. And I am looking forward to it. I totally need a copy. I might have to like fly to New Zealand to get one, or I don't know. I will find a way. But even though we talk about it in the episode, I just kind of wanted to bring that up. There's also a book coming out, I believe, in April by Will Cockrell, and it's about the commercial guiding, how it happened, especially on Mount Everest, and how it's changed things. Alan Arnett, he announced that he has a book coming out. He doesn't have a publisher yet. It's more about his journey on K2, as well as his journey with his mother and Alzheimer's, and awareness of that disease. And then I know that Ella Stewart had a book coming out believe it was supposed to be towards the end of this year. I did follow up with him. I haven't heard anything back, but I'm really excited. That's like at least 4 books that I know that you guys are excited to hear about. And then last but not least, I wanted to share a little message that was sent to me. It totally made my Monday, and it's a message that Ellis sent to me. I interviewed him last year, and I just wanted to share his little 3-sentence note. Thanks for mentioning my book in your top 10 Everest Books podcast recently, Pauline. Very kind. Keep up the great work with the podcast. You are doing great things. I love to hear things like that. It just makes me warm and fuzzy inside. And you guys know how much I love doing this. And I love my listeners. So thank you again so much, Ellis. You are a fabulous and wonderful human being. And that's it. We're going to go ahead with the rest of this episode. I hope you enjoy it. And here we go.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the All About Everest podcast. I am so excited to introduce Guy Cotter from Adventure Consultants. Hi, Guy, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to join you, and thanks for taking the time to have a chat.
So, how long have you been in the mountaineering industry?
Mountaineering industry. Well, I first started climbing, way back in the early 70s. Started when I was quite young, but finally became a guide in my early 20s. I'd been climbing around New Zealand and climbing internationally and skiing in America and been to Yosemite and rock climbing in Australia and all that, and came back to New Zealand and started my guides qualification in my early 20s, and finally finished my guides qualification in the 80s, and went on expeditions after that to the Himalayas, Alaska, and so on, and then first went to Everest in 1992, which I was lucky enough to make a successful ascent on that trip.
And when you first climbed Mount Everest, did you do it as a guide or as a mountaineer, or both?
I did it as a guide and a mountaineer, yes. A lot more mountaineering in those days. So I was working with Rob Hall and Gary Ball. They'd just started up Adventure Consultants, and they had climbed Everest themselves in 1990, and 1992 was the first, real commercial expedition that they ran to Everest, and we were alongside the likes of Alpine Ascents at the time. They were also starting up on the mountain that year, so we thought the mountain was pretty busy. There was about 80 people climbing, so things have changed a lot as far as the number of people going, and also just the concepts of what's achievable and what isn't. Certainly back then it was probably a lot more like mountaineering. Clients had to have a good resume before coming, and people would carry a lot more of their own gear, and it was like they were more like mountaineers, I guess, than the trend these days.
So would you say nowadays it's almost more touristy than it is mountaineering in a way?
Yeah, certainly, as Mesner put it, it's alpine mountain tourism, just because things are so well set up in that respect. The number of people on the mountain, and also the number of years that a lot of people have been going there, and if you like, the infrastructure that is part of being on Everest in this day and age compared to what it was like back then. Back then we were having to fix the ice fall, we had to fix the ropes up the mountain. All the teams would have to get together and try and collaborate on all of this, and it was interesting to see how well or otherwise groups did work together. And that was something that happened on Everest over the years, is that we're competitors with all of these other operators, but when we got to the mountain, was like the competition was over. We already had, the number of clients that we had, and we had to work together a lot to be able to have any of us have a chance of success. And alongside that were all of the usual international expeditions, or very small groups or whatever, who would not contribute anything. We'd have big base camp meetings, and everybody would agree to do all sorts of stuff, and then they wouldn't turn up when it came to it. So we ended up working alongside a lot of the operators. Who, some of them are still there today, still operating.
And would you say that the commercialization has not only changed mountaineering in a way, but it's also changed the face of Everest?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's changed the face of Everest a lot. I mean, some of it's positive. The mountain is much safer than it was way back when. The quality of the rope fixing and the ladders and the ice fall is all, way better than it used to be. So there are some positives. There are some parts of it that are, talked about in negative ways by members of the climbing community, and I can fully understand that. But we are working in the context of Nepal. It's their country, it's their mountain, we're guests on their mountain, and it's not really up to us to dictate terms. And I think what we're seeing now is we're sort of seeing an era where those of us who were mountaineers became guides, ran expeditions because we love being in the mountains and taking people to the mountains. We're now working alongside operators who are just there for the money, and it's a business. And whilst that might be the death of adventure and the death of mountaineering the way that it was, it's also the livelihood of a lot of the Nepalese. They sort of see that it's a great thing for especially the Sherpa people, because they've got a direct connection to it. They're fully involved with it. And so we have our Western point of view about what mountaineering should be like. But that's always been the thing that I've enjoyed about Everest, is you meet people from all walks of life who have a different point of view about everything in the world. And our Western point of view about what mountaineering, the romantic Western idea of what it should be like, sure, that's relevant to us, but not everybody in the world thinks the same way. And it's actually up to us to acknowledge that and recognize that, because a lot of people just can't get past the fact that it's no longer mountaineering as they knew it, and they just throw their arms up in disgust. But there are positives going on, and I think that for us to move forward, we've got to kind of work in with the local operators and try and encourage an approach that is workable environmentally, socially, and also to protect the reputation of mountaineering, because to a lot of people it's a circus what's going on, and I can fully appreciate why.
Yeah, that seems to be one of the ongoing themes that we talk about, is this circus that's happening, some of the integrity that's being lost, people that are in it just for the money without thinking of the other things around it, like the safety. How important do you think safety is when it comes to an operator?
It's paramount. Safety should be paramount, and it's not that hard to work it out, how to operate safely, especially in this day and age. But there are the structure, the mindset of the operation, the way they put the expedition together, and also the relationship they have with the clients who are coming along, and the expectation for the clients is very different from what it used to be, and very different from the way we would approach all of that. And what I mean by that is that an operator is trying to attract clients, and even the Western operators started up like this. They'd see the likes of us and Alpine Ascents there. They'd say, there's no room in the market. What can we do? Oh, we can be cheaper. That's how we can, get a foot into this market. And that's what IMG did in the early days on Everest. They realized that they couldn't just operate the same way as us. So they chose a different model, which was Sherpa-led. And that kind of started the ripple effect of where we've got to now. And so what we've got now is a situation where there are a lot of operators who are selling their trips at the lowest rate that they, or just cheaper than the other guys. And that's how they get clients. But what they're also attracting is the client who is shopping on the internet for the cheapest Everest expedition they can get onto. What they're not realizing, including many of the operators, they're not realizing that they haven't done a budget. They're just going cheaper than the other guys. And so they don't have the money to actually provide the services that are required. And so, we're seeing people turn up with no experience because they've been allowed onto the expedition. There's not enough Sherpa support. There's not enough of everything, oxygen and so on. And this is having a ripple effect through to theft on the mountain, through, people, a lot of these accidents that are occurring that are totally avoidable. So, that's where we've got to. And, we need to come back to safety and sustainability, as being the primary objectives that we have when we go to the mountain rather than to make money.
One of the other things besides like the safety and making sure that you can provide everything, there are certain criteria that the guiding company, most of them, have for their clients. Do you have those in place as well? Like if you're going to allow someone on an expedition, what experience do they have to have? Things like that.
Certainly on our trips, we work with people for quite a few years sometimes to get them from a starting point to when they get to Everest. So the criteria varies a little bit depending on where people come from and what attributes they bring as far as their fitness and strength and so on. But we're certainly looking at people having done the likes of mountaineering courses followed by ascent, say in Europe, getting up some mountaineering background, going on and maybe doing one of the trekking peaks in Nepal, and then probably doing something like Aconcagua or Denali as stepping stones to Everest. Because what I want to see is that people, when they arrive on the mountain, that they are actually capable of looking after themselves. They're strong enough. They can work within the safety parameters that we create for them. And I also want to see people climb the mountain themselves. They're not being dragged up by us. We're not taking all of the glory and they just step in line sort of thing. I want to see people walk away from the expedition feeling that it's something that they personally have achieved. And people, I think, feel a much greater sense of achievement if they have done the mountain in style. And that is in itself going out of style, because there are so many people who don't do it in style. If again, I'm referring back to probably my approach to how mountains should be climbed. But we're seeing people come down off the mountain and fly out from Camp 2 because they don't want to go down through the icefall another time. These sorts of things going on that to me is just not mountaineering. But that's the so some people are operating like that. So our approach is to actually get people looking after themselves and operating with us. We guide people, we show them the way, but we're not doing it for them.
Another question that comes up a lot when I've talked to operators is, do you think it's cheating if you were to circumvent the Khumbu icefall with a helicopter?
For me personally, yes. And again, it's a style thing. But I personally think you've got to go all the way up the mountain, all the way back down. And I think people who get rescued after they've summited shouldn't get a summit certificate. That would be one of the simple things to do to sort out a lot of these issues that are going on. It's not a difficult thing to do. And then we would see people, being fully committed to getting up and down the mountain and recognizing that if they need help getting off after they've dragged themselves to the summit, and give up hope then and just get everybody to take them down off the mountain because they got too tired, that they don't get a summit certificate. And it would very quickly sort out the problem.
I think that that's a really good point, especially with this last spring, the amount of rescues on the mountain, people being helicoptered out, the amount of injury. Talking to a couple of doctors, the amount of frostbite and injuries was like more than double what it is in a normal year.
Way more. Yeah, I mean, it was a very, very cold season this season. A lot of frostbite. And, part of it is that people aren't used to looking after themselves, and they need to be told everything, as opposed to have developed enough mountaineering skills to know, oh, my hands are cold. I mean, it is quite difficult for some people to understand this, but it's just something that we've got to try and make sure that people don't get themselves into trouble. And see, I think a big part of the issue that we're seeing is that when we first started coming here, we'd work with a local agency in Nepal who would help us with the permits and sometimes staffing and whatever level of service you wanted, but we were the people who ran the expedition. Same with all the national teams or anybody who came to run the expedition. And then we heard from some of the locals that they thought that they were doing all the work. We're just the middlemen. They thought they would cut us out. That's as simple as they were thinking about it. And so they started to offer expeditions to anybody who wanted to sign up. And so you get all of these individuals who haven't been vetted turning up on an expedition. The operator watches these people go off and die, and they go, well, it's not our fault. We have no responsibility about this. Just as me working with an operator, they're not responsible for the decisions I make. So they didn't actually make the connection between what is the responsibility of guiding a person on the mountain and what that entails. And unfortunately, because of a lack of guiding skills from a lot of the cheaper operators, and this is Western and local, they don't know how to avoid accidents happening. So what's happening now is that people are paying least that they can. They end up with one Sherpa on summit day or whatever. They go up to the top because they don't have enough physical experience to know how to look after their energy levels. All they're thinking about is the summit. They get to the summit, it's like, oh, help, get me down. And of course, one single Sherpa with this person isn't going to be able to get that person down. But that's all they've set themselves up for. And the operator hasn't identified that they need more support, because this is one of the things that people are going to do. Inexperienced people just have no idea that they're going to get themselves in these situations. The Sherpa tries their best to help get this person down. They run out of oxygen. They're still high on the mountain. They go, well, either I sit here with this person and I die too, or I leave them to die. And that's what's been happening. That's what most of the incidents on Everest this season was, exactly that. And because most of them aren't real guides. See, Nepal's got a Mountain Guides Association of very good, highly skilled guides, just like the rest of the world. And they're good. They're very good operators. But there's a lot there who have been guiding on the mountain, if you like. They've been escorting people on the mountain, but they don't actually have guiding background, don't have a guiding skill. Great mountaineers, but they're a big part of guiding is actually looking after other people and avoiding accidents. And that's when people aren't strong enough to be able to have a summit attempt. You've got to stop them going up there. What's the point? Letting people get to the point where they fall over in the tracks and then they go, now you go down. It just puts everybody else in danger. And this is part of that cultural issue. There's also a cultural issue, again, coming back to our Western values about mountaineering and how a lot of Westerners don't want to be guided because that they see themselves as an adventurer and really good at everything they've ever done, and they get up on the mountain and they don't want to have somebody telling them what to do. So they get themselves into trouble because their Sherpa who's escorting them isn't going to tell them to put their gloves on when it's cold. They're not going to make sure they're fed properly and everything. Put the sunblock on and put your glasses on here, and we're going to have to turn around because you're going too slowly and we're not going to get to the summit. And this is what we're seeing. And again, in the early days, we saw this from Western operators who were bringing clients who weren't real guides, and the same thing would happen. And when Russell Bryce ended up coming over from the north side to the south side of Everest in the 90s, he had tried to set up a thing he called IGO 8000, which is International Guiding Organization 8000. So to try and get everybody who was running expeditions to the 8,000 meter peaks to have to follow some standards, have standards, things like communications, medical equipment, rescue equipment, these sorts of things. And also part of it was defining what style of expedition you ran, be that guided like we do, or commercially led, and so on. There are different categories that people might slot into, and some of these operators were perfect for experienced mountaineers to go in and say be on a commercially led expedition or services only. But what we're seeing now is anybody going on to those same standard type of operations and not have the support that they need. But Russell tried to set up IGO 8000 and probably didn't get enough buy-in from all the operators. We were all busy just trying to survive, and it was kind of a shame that disappeared, because if that had stuck around, it would be totally valid right now, and it's what is needed right now over there in Nepal.
I absolutely agree 100%. There needs to be something that really holds everyone accountable for standards. Does your company run expeditions on both the north and the south side, or primarily the south or the north?
We've always been primarily the south side. Ever since I've been there. I haven't actually climbed Everest from the north side, but we go to Choya Yu in the post-monsoon on the north side in Tibet. And good to see that's opened up again. So next year we're going to be running expeditions back there. But no, we've always been a south side operator. It's kind of like a second home. I think I've spent more time there than I have at home. So there you go.
Yeah, I hear that Nepal is just magical, and there's so many people that they start their Nepal experience with a trek, and many don't even leave, or they decide to climb these huge mountains because there's just something about it that is different than any other place. So you started out as just a regular mountain guide, and tell us a little bit. I know a lot of people who listen probably know parts of the story, but how did you become the owner of your company?
So
of Adventure Consultants.
Adventure Consultants, that's right. So as I said, I went to Everest the first time in 1992 with Rob Hall and Gary Ball, who had started up Ball and Ball Adventure Consultants, had the audacious idea of guiding people up Everest. I was a very active mountain guide and mountaineer in New Zealand at the time, and had climbed a little bit in the Himalayas and Alaska and so on. And so they wanted somebody to come and help. I came along as third guide. We summited that year, Rob and Gary and myself and half a dozen clients and a few Sherpas. Went back in 93. Gary was suffering some respiratory issues, and then in the post-monsoon of 93, he actually died on Dhaulagiri of pulmonary edema, tragically. He was with Rob. on that trip. And then Rob was running Adventure Consultants by himself. I was guiding more of their expeditions for them. And then in 1996, I was not there on Everest. I was running a short trip to Pomori, and I was in touch with Rob and met up with the group, and then they went up to Summit in 96, and then tragically, storm came in. It ended up with Rob and several of the rest of the team passing away, and everybody knows about 96 because of Into Thin Air and the IMAX movie and so on. And then more recently, the Everest movie that I was involved in helping to make. So at that point, I had set myself up as a high altitude guide, and my two mentors had passed away. And I figured I was going to carry on guiding over there some way. And then Rob's wife, Jan, suggested that if I wanted to buy the remnants of the company and carry it on, then that was something that she was up for. And so I did that, not really, knowing how long it would last or whatever, but a big part of my motivation was to keep our Sherpa crew working. They were as devastated as anybody else about what happened in 96. And so we started up again and ran expeditions, to Amatablam, Choya that same year. And then Ed Visas came to work with me on some of those, because Ed had also been working with Rob and Gary in 94 and 95. So we'd come to know each other. So that was where it all started. And I'd already had a guiding operation here in New Zealand that I was a partner in. And so had a bit of an awareness about running a mountain guiding business, but it was next level again, being on the international stage and dealing with international clientele and so on. So it was a big step up for me. I was quite happy working as a guide, and was quite happy with Rob and Gary running the company, but that ended up changing and putting me into a situation where I had to decide my future and which way I was going to go. And so I picked up the remnants of the company and carried on. So that was quite a few years ago now, 27 years ago or something. So we've carried on building the company. It's based in New Zealand, but we had a New Zealand operation, European operation based in Chamonix as part of a climbing school, and a sense of the peaks around there, Mont Blanc, Matterhorn, and so on. And then got to the stage where we were running 35 to 50 expeditions a year all over the world prior to COVID coming in. And that put a stop on all of it. Everything stopped for 2 years. And in the last year, we've started up again, and we've rebuilt and ran an Everest expedition this year, and running expeditions to Nepal and Vincent and Antarctica and all the 7 summits. So we're back operating pretty much the same as what we were before, but we took a big hit through those couple of years, and takes quite a lot to get restarted again, just from the administration side of it. But very exciting that we're back up and doing this, and still able to get out there and enjoy being in the high mountains, and I think bring our approach to it all. We've got a certain style. I think Adventure Consultants has always been identified as one of the operators that everybody else is trying to emulate, and that's a good position to be in. I mean, we try to do things to the highest standard that we can, surrounded by great staff, motivated people, and it's a pleasure to be involved in a world like this, where we're bringing lots of pleasure to people, but we're doing it with a sort of a panache and a style, and with safety at the forefront, to put our mark on in an industry that wasn't around when we started, And I think what we're seeing now is the industry going through some, growing pains. It would be really good to see it self-regulated, but it's not really occurring over in Nepal. So, but at the same time, everybody is very reluctant to see government intervention and regulation in Nepal, because they've just got the ability to not get it right over there and would probably make things worse rather than better. But I think in the long term, if they were to get some consultants in to show them what they could do and how they could run it, maybe look at the Denali style approach, so that we can protect the mountain and protect the reputation of mountaineering and Everest, and ensure that people who go to the mountain have the skills to be there. I think that would be, the first step.
That does make a lot of sense, because Denali is regulated, and there are some other ones out there as well. Did you ever think that you, like back when you started in the mountaineering industry, just as a guide and before that as a climber, did you think that you were basically going to be the owner of such a big mountaineering expedition company, which is, and like you said, you guys are kind of the standard in a lot of ways. You're considered one of the guiding companies out there. So did you ever think that that was going to happen?
No, I had no idea. I was quite happy just being a guide and doing lots of really amazing trips to different parts of the world, and I just felt that I was incredibly lucky. So, and I didn't really have an ambition to be a businessman, if you like. I had an ambition to be in the mountains, and that's what I think still translates through our organisation, is that it's actually not about making money. It's actually about being able to perform our art to the best of our ability. And I think everybody that I work with feels the same way about their contribution to that. And that's a really privileged place to be in, and for us to have a if you like, a working environment that is following that sort of thread, then it's been a privilege. But I never thought I was going to be there. It was never something that I aspired to. I just love climbing and love being in the mountains and showing people the great environment, and being able to operate with people in some of the most extreme conditions and environments in the world and do it safely.
And you've had, your company and you have had all of these ups and downs. You guys had the 96 Everest disaster. There was 2014 on Everest, 2015 on Everest, and then COVID. And what is the biggest thing that you have personally learned from those ups and downs?
Probably the biggest thing is that nothing's permanent, and that change will occur, and that you've just got to be prepared for it, not expect that life's just going to carry on a certain trajectory and it's all going to be beer and skittles down the track. And I think we learn a lot. You're right, we've been through some calamities. You go through minor calamities on every expedition. Major ones have occurred. 30 years on Everest and the most extreme conditions in the world, and of course things are going to go wrong, and they have. But to actually have the fortitude to work through that and realize that every time you are confronted with a challenge, you have the ability to learn something about yourself and how you respond to these events. Like just going into the mountains alone, especially big mountains like Everest, I've always likened it to holding a big mirror up to yourself, where you get to see all of your strengths, all of your weaknesses, and you can do with that what you will. First thing is you've got to do is be open enough to identify what your weaknesses are, and that's what mountaineering gives us. It gives us challenges that we can supersede where we were before by learning something, developing ourselves, becoming a better climber. But that also relates to becoming a better person as well. Once you realize that you have to work through these difficult times, you can't just ignore them. And getting through that on multiple occasions, I think it gives you a bit of more acceptance that things don't always work to a plan and that things might change, and go with it. Life is an adventure, and if you live in this world, it's a huge adventure, and it's always going to challenge you. And if you don't want to be challenged, then don't do this. And that's why when you see some people come to the mountain and they're like, well, I don't want to be challenged. That's what you come for, so that you can have a bit of a struggle and then learn a bit about yourself.
You've talked about how your company has grown. Initially when you took it over and now, how many staff did you start with initially, and how many do you have now?
Well, started with 0 staff. Well, kind of adopted one that was working with Madeline David, who was still working with Rob and Gary. She stayed with us for a little while, but then we started off. Suze Kelly started as with us back when I took it over, and is now general manager. And we built up to a staff of just in our office here in New Zealand, 14 staff. And then we had guides all over the world, up to 25 in New Zealand. We work with 20 or 30 guides in Europe, guides from all over the world who join us on expeditions, hundreds of Nepalese staff. It's very hard to put a finger on exactly how many. I've never been able to do that, but because it changes all the time, depending on what events we've got on, what expeditions we've got on, what time of the year it is. But yeah, it's been really busy. So we're back to half a dozen staff, plus we've got Caroline Bracey over in Chamonix as our European operations. And so we've got staff in Nepal who are permanent with us. So we're building back up. We're just getting back to that point where we have a few more staff and spreads the load a little bit.
Because COVID did take its toll on your company. It did for most of the expeditions. And did you think at the time that you were going to be able to make a comeback?
Well, I treated it a little bit like avalanche condition in the mountains, that you run away from it and don't put yourself in harm's way until it's safe to go out again. And that's kind of the approach that we've had. So we hunkered down. We went into hibernation. We had to shut everything down, and unfortunately, had to lay everyone off because there was no income, and still a lot of outgoings. So to actually get it, back up and running, has taken a reasonable amount of effort. But at the same time, we went back to Everest this year, and all of our Sherpa staff came back to work for us who have been working for other operators over the last few years. And it was so nice to see them all back. And they were just really happy to see us back so they could come back and work with us. And that was, really fulfilling for me to have that happen.
I've been told by several people that the Sherpa community really likes having your company like as a boss. They really appreciate you guys, and you do them right. So
yeah, thanks. Yeah, and that's always been our intention, to look after our staff. And after the earthquake in 2015, we lost 6 staff in base camp. And we started up a a fund based on those accidents that occurred in the Himalayas for the families of the men who had died, who were breadwinners for the family. So we've got 13 children that we've been putting through school through our Sherpa Future Fund, and that's thanks to sponsors who work with us to either sponsor a child individually or to contribute to the fund that looks after the well-being of these kids. So we've had these kids go through high quality boarding school so that we can provide them what their fathers were working on the mountains to achieve, so that their kids could get an education and they'd stand a lot better chance in life to to be able to succeed. So that's just been one of the things that we've done to try and support the staff, because it's vital that we can contribute where we can, and we're all in it together is the way I feel about it. In this company we all have a part to play, and if we can help each other out, then that's a good thing too.
And can anybody who wants to contribute to this fund, and if so, where can they find it?
Sherpa Future Fund, you can find it on our website. I think it's in specialty services, and it's if you dig down there, you can find it. Anybody can contribute. So that's always appreciated, to get the support to help these kids out.
What are some of the things you told me just before we started recording, that you have a project that you've been working on? Tell us a little bit more about it, because on this podcast we talk about books a lot.
Yeah, so one thing that was positive during COVID was that I managed to finally get around to writing a book that I've been scribbling away at for the last 20 years, 30 years maybe. So I've written a book called Everest Mountain Guide, the remarkable story of a Kiwi Mountaineer. It's been being produced, published here in New Zealand in October, first publication, still only in New Zealand at this point, but it chronicles what's happened over the last 30 years, or all my life really, which has been a bit longer than that, but focusing on what occurred in my life to get myself to a point that I was guiding on Everest, and then also all of the events that have occurred since that time, like 3 decades on Everest. It's a long, long time. Lots happened. So, there was a certain amount that had to get, or couldn't make it into the book. But I've really tried to give a bit of a background as to what it takes to guide on Everest, and some of the events and incidents that have happened, over the breadth of that time. And yeah, there's a lot of drama in there, and it has been a very dramatic time in lots of ways, but there's also been a lot of highlights that not only for me, but for our staff, for the clients who come along, and also to be in that mountain environment. You were alluding to it before, but one of the great things about being in Nepal is the Nepalese people are very hospitable. Great to work with, hard workers, humble. They've got a lot of incredibly great attributes that that I really admire, and I've always felt like I've been working alongside them, and that we're all in it together. Especially when I was first there as a mountain guide on Everest, I was a mountain worker just like the Sherpas were. So I felt a certain affinity to working with them, and that's one of the really big reasons we enjoy going back. It's not just the physical makeup of the mountain, it's the community that we're there with that we so enjoy.
I can't wait until your book comes out. I'm looking forward to it. You have to let us know so that I can
Okay, I'll let you
share.
know. I'll jump in when I've got a hard copy in front of me, and I'll show it to you. And
Fabulous.
It's only being published in New Zealand at this point. So if anyone knows an American publisher who wants to publish it, let me know. But we'll be able to do book sales. You can be able to hook up on our website and make a purchase once the book is published in early October is when we're anticipating it'll be here after the printing's finished.
I'm excited. I can't wait. We talk a lot on the podcast about those that are no longer here from the mountaineering community. And did you want to share something about Rob and the team from 1996? Any anecdotes that you want to share? Because their Everest story is very important to remember.
Yeah, I mean, Rob was a great friend. We'd started doing trips in the mountains from when I was 15 years old, and he was a similar age to me. And he was somebody who was incredibly thoughtful and capable, and he had a great brain for sorting out problems. And he was also very committed mountaineer. He did a lot of climbing here in New Zealand before he went overseas and achieved great things. And he was a driven individual, but he was also relatively quiet and humble and just easy to be around. And Rob was somebody who was always going to achieve great things. With his passing, which was tragic, there were other people as well who went through that event. Andy Harris was another guide who was working on the mountain with Rob who disappeared that night, and we understand he'd gone back up the mountain to try and help Rob. We didn't know for quite some time what had happened to Andy, because John Krakauer had got down to South Col and he thought that he had travelled down to South Col with Andy Harris all the way back to South Col, and that Andy Harris had disappeared. But John Krakauer didn't understand that the guy he was with was Martin Adams, who was with the Alpine Ascents team, who was 2 feet shorter than Andy Harris and had an American accent and a different coloured suit and so on. But so we were confused for quite a long time about what had happened there. And Andy had been a great friend through my early guiding era as well. Doug Hansen, Suko Namba, also perished that time. And the whole thing was incredibly tragic. And that is what we don't go to the mountains for. And but you realize, or I realized after the events, that if I just stopped climbing, it wasn't going to stop these things happening. We weren't going to see people not dying in the mountains anymore. So it's just takes some drive and motivation to get up and go into the mountains when you know this had happened. But what I had to really focus on was taking over Adventure Consultants. So I had to go next level with ensuring that we did remain safe, and that we I didn't want to see what happened in '96 as the last chapter of Kiwi guides on Everest. We'd achieved so much, and Rob and Gary had achieved so much. They were great mentors and had set the scene in many ways for how the industry should be moving forward, probably alongside Todd Burleson from Alpine Ascents. We had a similar sort of focus, and to actually use their memories and the incidents that had occurred as a learning experience to avoid these things happening again, was what I guess their passing gave us. That has probably helped us and the whole industry in many ways.
Thank you so much for joining us, Guy. I really appreciate our conversation. I hope to have you back on once your book is published so you can talk about that. And we'll be watching your company next year on Mount Everest. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that. It's been lovely to talk.
And that is it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Guy was so much fun to interview. Next week, we have a fabulous lady, Saskia van der Drift. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Sorry, Saskia. And she participated in 2022 in the Mount Everest Marathon, which I hadn't really heard of before I started talking to her. Such a sweet lady. She is from the Netherlands, and I really enjoyed her talking about her experience basically doing the highest marathon in the entire world. One more quick thing that I wanted to mention. I'm working on not editing so much because I think that I lose a lot when I over edit and it just doesn't sound as smooth. A lot of it is because I kind of stumble over my words sometimes. I become self-conscious. I think part of it is because I do think in Hebrew and English, and so I stumble a little bit. But then I start thinking about my pronunciation because, I did get that review that I can't say mountain correctly because I say mountain, and, it's a regional thing. And so I'm trying to make it more smooth and just working on that. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate every single one of you. And that is it for tonight's episode. Climb your own climb, everybody. And I'll talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the All About Everest podcast. We would love it if you would rate, subscribe, and follow wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us on social media at All About Everest Podcast or at Mama Bear Outdoors. You can support our podcast by subscribing to our Patreon or by buying us a coffee. Until next time.